Good morning, I'm Taylor Wilson, and today is Wednesday, October 2nd, 2024. This is The Excerpt. Today, we look back on last night's vice presidential debate. Plus, we hear from North Carolina as residents remain missing after Helene. And we discuss Border Patrol agents' mental health. Vice presidential candidates J.D. Vance and Tim Walz took the stage last night in New York for the CBS News vice presidential debate. And viewers expecting a boxing match got something a little different. I spoke with USA Today chief political correspondent Philip M. Bailey right after the debate wrapped to put the night in context. Philip, another late night. I thank you so much for hopping on with me.
No problem, Taylor.
So, Philip, let's just set the scene as you're so good doing. Can you just describe the atmosphere in the room? What was the tone like on this debate stage?
Well, look, I think that if anything, this debate will stand out because these two men certainly tried to play up their Midwestern roots, and they certainly played Midwestern nice. Through several points in the debate, they were agreeing with each other, saying each other's first names, complimenting one another, giving each other the benefit of the doubt at different points, and really just focusing all of their attacks at the top of the ticket on Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. So the two of them were very collegial. I think it might be a shock to a lot of folks that we're still capable of that in the United States. I certainly think that J.D. Vance, more so than even Governor Walz, understands that he's a bit underwater in the polls. So he was someone who was trying to certainly show off that, hey, he's a nice guy, he can get along with folks, and everything works out for him.
Yeah, so, both candidates really did lean on their backgrounds in different ways. How did they address who they are and where they come from for a public, Philip, that largely does not know either of them before this year?
Right. Neither one of these candidates is that well known. The VP candidates are never at the top of the ticket. Because this might be the last debate of the 2024 campaign, I think there was a lot of pressure on this undercard. Usually the vice presidential debate is very forgettable, but this is probably the last opportunity for the two campaigns to contrast themselves before the American people. Donald Trump has not agreed to do another debate with Vice President Harris. So I think both of them understood the pressure of that. But like a lot of vice presidential debates, they weren't really going after each other, right? The two of them weren't really shooting at each other as much as they were shooting at the top of the ticket.
And in terms of those backgrounds, there have been some controversies for either candidate. Did any of those issues come up, and how did they address them on the night?
Certainly, they gave some sort of polite references to some issues in the past, but really the moderators did a lot of that heavy lifting, right? Governor Walz was asked about some of his misspeaking in the past, saying that he was in Tiananmen Square when that massacre happened in 1989. He was not, it appears. He certainly has other parts of his military record that he looks like he's embellished, like, for example, saying he carried weapons of war into combat. The Harris campaign said he misspoke there. And I think the governor even said, hey, I'm a bit of a knucklehead. I'm a regular guy. Sometimes I misspeak. I say things. I forget things. We'll see if that sort of aw shucks moment worked. But they were certainly pressed. I think in particular, Governor Walz was pressed on some of his misstatements in the past, which Republicans have certainly blasted. I think the Make America Great Again Incorporated, the super PAC supporting Donald Trump, came out with a Tiananmen Tim website today to make fun of him and to call out some of those misstatements in the past. And I think that will happen more and more and be prosecuted more by the campaign. Vance really didn't seem as interested in that going after Harris, though.
So in terms of the big issues of the night, what did they really focus on? I know they jumped around a little bit, Philip, but what were the issues, and did each of them really stay on message and stick to their running mates' platforms, or did they try to differentiate themselves?
Look, there's some news of the day that obviously came up, right? Hurricane Helene, the international crises with Iran attempting to make military strikes, airstrikes against Israel. And it seemed like Walz wasn't very comfortable in that setting. But I think you saw, for example, Walz really lean into abortion, talking about cases of women dying or having their health care threatened in cases like that. I think Senator Vance obviously really put the pedal to the metal when it came to immigration, saying that, look, if Donald Trump is brought back into office, he's going to stop the bleeding at the border, and really continuing with former President Trump's commentary on the campaign trail, really leaning into the immigration debate. So they both kept with those themes. I just think that, again, the two of them really being very complimentary with each other. We were expecting a bruising boxing match and really got a bromance, Taylor, out of this debate.
Well, as you touched on, Philip, this is sort of a unique VP debate in the sense that it does have some added import to it. It's the last debate, presumably, of this election cycle. How important really is tonight? Does it move the needle for these candidates, and what might be the lasting impact?
I don't think this moves the needle necessarily. I think certainly for the campaigns, they'll look at some of these cues and points and look for strategy and points to leverage voters. I don't think that a voter goes in this and goes, oh, well, now I'm convinced one way or the other necessarily. But I do think that both men passed the likability test, and that was really important for Vance. So I don't think it's a measure of who won the debate between the two of them. I think Vance did the better job of the question he had for himself in this debate was his likability. Polls show that he was far more underwater than Walz, far more underwater than even Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. And I think he succeeded in coming off as a relatable person. He didn't get hit up on the cat ladies comment a whole lot and didn't seem like Governor Walz was really pounding him on that much. So from my standpoint, I look at this and go, Vance came out better because he was able to come out more likable, and the more likable version of this debate benefited him.
All right, great insight as always. Philip M. Bailey is USA Today's chief political correspondent, joining me late night after the debate. Thank you, Philip.
No problem, Taylor. See you soon, man.
Search and rescue efforts continue after Hurricane Helene battered the southeastern U.S. As of this morning, at least 100 people are reported to have died due to the storm, and hundreds are still missing. Millions remain without power, with certain parts of western North Carolina among the most devastated. Helene is already going down as one of the deadliest storms to make landfall in U.S. history. Inland communities are seeing substantial amounts of wreckage from wind and water. For many in western parts of North Carolina, power, water, and internet likely won't be restored for weeks. Landslides have taken away mountain properties, sinkholes have claimed other homes, and Asheville and the surrounding communities face long-term trauma. Thousands of people have been displaced, like Ann Wells and her orange tabby cat Garfield from Asheville.
For me, I just moved in and supposed to have renter's insurance and found out it's in a floodplain zone. And then when all this happened, I have lost everything. I've spent out over $6,000 trying to move out of my own pocket. Now it's all gone.
Nearby, Jeffrey Burrows, the president of the River Arts District, surveyed the devastation from a balcony.
So there's a lot of history here. And, the River Arts District is like a part of the soul of our city. We were working on creating a giant arts festival to launch next year. And, this has changed everything.
More than 300 artists called the district home. Now the area has been completely devastated by Helene. You can stay up on all the latest from the storm's aftermath on usatoday.com. U.S. Border Patrol agents face a mounting mental health toll. I spoke with USA Today national immigration reporter Lauren Villagran to learn more. Lauren, thanks for making the time on this story.
Hey, Taylor, thanks for having me.
So, Lauren, let's just start with this. How bad really has the mental health crisis gotten among Border Patrol agents in recent years?
Well, it really came to a head in 2022 when it came to light that 15 Border Patrol agents had committed suicide during that year. The reasons for why someone takes their own life are obviously complex and varied, but it really was a wake-up call for U.S. Customs and Border Protection to the stressors, both at home and at work, that agents are facing in the field.
Yeah, so let's talk through some of those stressors. What factors really do contribute to some of the mental health issues that we've seen here?
I mean, look, I've been covering the border for some odd 20 years. And I've seen the conditions that Border Patrol agents work in. It's not an easy job. No law enforcement job is. But there are some things that are really unique to this agency. For one, the terrain is incredibly difficult, especially here in the West Texas and New Mexico area. The desert can be dangerous, and Border Patrol agents are often working alone for long stretches. And Taylor, over the last 2 years, this part of the border has seen an enormous increase in migrant deaths. Dozens of agents in El Paso sector this year either lost a migrant that they were trying to save or came upon remains in the desert.
Absolutely brutal. So, Lauren, how is the agency tackling this issue? What are some of the resources they're leaning into, and have they seen any success?
Well, historically, the culture of Border Patrol has been one in which you tough it out, you choke it up, and you don't ask for help. And that is changing now, or CBP as a parent agency is trying to change that culture. The agency has been swarming resources to the border, mental health resources. And there's a number of programs. So, for example, the long-standing program of peer support is getting additional resources. That's basically where, field agents raise their hand and say, hey, yeah, I want to be someone who other agents know they can reach out to if they're struggling with something. There's a chaplaincy program. There's also new programs like a canine program in which certain dogs are trained up to be sort of emotional support animals and help other agents open up about what they may be dealing with. CBP has sent psychologists to some border stations, and there are actual agents who are dedicated to being a bridge between those psychologists and agents in the field. It's not been easy. Many of the agents I spoke with are former military vets. They are, again, used to handling problems on their own and keeping up a tough man or woman facade. But the agency is trying to break that down because the job is hard.
I'm curious, Lauren, have we heard from migrant advocates about the importance of mental health for border agents, and what might that mean for the migrants themselves?
It's important to note that the toll of migrant deaths hits migrant families first and hardest. Those who are on their journey north and who die on the way, they're often the family's breadwinner. The loss is immeasurable. There's really no way to calculate it. At the same time, border agents who are coming upon these bodies in the desert, they often have to stay with the remains while they wait for a sheriff's deputy or forensic investigator to show up. The bodies may have been out in the desert for days. And this fiscal year, fiscal 24, through Friday, September 27th, 175 migrants died in El Paso sector alone. That's up from 149 last fiscal year. And Taylor, just so that you can understand the dimension, even just 5 or 6 years ago, El Paso sector would see 5, 6, 7 migrant deaths, nothing like what we saw this year.
All right, Lauren Villagran covers the border and immigration for USA Today. Thank you, Lauren.
Thanks, Taylor.
The ACLU today is suing for information about the federal government's capacity to massively detain and deport immigrants. The lawsuit comes during a U.S. election season when immigration has been central to the presidential campaign. Republican Donald Trump has promised a mass deportation of unauthorized immigrants, while Democrat Kamala Harris has pushed for tougher restrictions on asylum seekers at the border. In the complaint filed in the U.S. Southern District of New York, the ACLU claims the federal government spends billions each year to fund detention and deportation infrastructure, yet much of the specific information about how the detention and deportation apparatus operates is unavailable to the public. You can read through some of the specifics with a link in today's show notes. The asteroid Apophis has a tiny chance of hitting Earth on Friday the 13th of April in 2029. How at risk is mankind if asteroid strikes, and what steps are scientists taking to avert a catastrophic collision? Scientist and author Robin George Andrews, whose new book, How to Kill an Asteroid, has just been released, joins my colleague Dana Taylor on the excerpt later today after 4 p.m. Eastern Time to discuss how scientists are working to literally save the planet. You can find the episode right here on this feed. And thanks for listening to the excerpt. You can get the podcast wherever you get your pods. And if you're on a smart speaker, just ask for the excerpt. I'm Taylor Wilson, and I'll be back tomorrow with more of the excerpt from USA Today.